Hello. Talk about something tonight that I was talking about before with some people. So, you know, when people are involved in the criminal justice system and they become involved, whether that's arrested, whether it's they're put on probation, they're sentenced to a term of imprisonment, whatever may happen, at that point, in a lot of ways, for all intents and purposes, they become kind of a leech on society, for lack of a better phrase. And I want to talk about that and what that actually means. You know, when you're an inmate, when you're a probationer, you know, when you're on parole or something like that, you have costs that are associated with that. Whether it's costs that you have to pay for the supervision, for the ankle bracelet if you're on a home incarceration, something like that. Kentucky, again, I'm from Kentucky, so I'm talking about the state and the place that I've experienced some of these things. They have fees that are associated with home incarceration, as far as the reporting, the installation of the monitor, things like that. So you have to pay those costs or share in some of those costs anyway. If you're on probation or parole, you have fees that are paid to the parole officer for some of their costs. They're a very minuscule amount in comparison, but it is still an arrangement where you're paying some money for it. If you're an inmate, certainly you're everything that you get, other than the money that you make from your state job, if you have one, and family money that family sends into you. Everything that's provided to you, from your bedding to your food to your housing, I guess if you want to call it that. It's a cell, most places, or a dorm, open bay, depending on what kind of a housing situation your facility that you're at has. So, you know, for your food and for all those other things, you're relying on the state. You're relying on the state, and the state is the people of the state. So that's your victim's family in some cases. It's the everyone pays taxes. People that are obeying the law anyway pay taxes, and that money goes into that system, the parole and prison system. So, you can do things a few different ways. You can blame everyone and blame your mom, your lawyer, the judge, the cop that arrested you. I'm a little sick tonight, so apologize for the coughing and the way I sound, but you can blame everybody else. Ultimately, I mean, if this is not for someone that's innocent, if you're innocent, then by all means fight and scream and do whatever else you need to do to get your situation dealt with. That's to me, that's a perversion of justice. That if someone's innocent, is in prison, or is convicted of something that they didn't do, that should never happen, but it does. But if you're guilty, accept it, and that's very hard for people to do that commit crimes and break the law and end up going to prison, going to jail. I mean, in Kentucky, there's a unit in probation and parole that a lot of what they do is go on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and other social media type situations, and they look for people that are on their list, that are on parole or on probation, and look for video and picture evidence of them breaking the law. And you know what? They find it every week, every month. They find it. Picture of a guy that is at the Tennessee border with a bunch of money and a gun and dope, and he's at the Tennessee border. I mean, that's evidence that he's left the state. If he's a convicted felon, obviously, then so it just, I mean, you can see where some of this stuff, leads to. You have people that come to jail or prison and they want to cry. I guess I spent 2,222 days in prison in Kentucky, but who's counting? So you have people that come to jail or prison, they want to cry about getting caught. And when I was in prison, I had a few different thoughts about responsibility. I always believed that a burglar was one of the dumbest type of criminals there is. I mean, you're going into someone else's house or a business or whatever it may be, but most typically it's a house. You're going to someone else's house. You don't know the layout, probably. Maybe you know how the house is set up. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's someone you know. Maybe it's your mom. I mean, maybe you're that guy going into someone's house that you know, and you're breaking in their house. But, you know, you go into someone's house, you don't know how it's laid out, you don't know if they have a gun or a knife or a kitchen block or a spatula or whatever, or kids that you may stumble across or go by their bedroom, where the bedrooms are at, all this other kind of stuff, alarms, dogs, cameras. I mean, so, and then I knew a guy that had like 60 counts of burglary. He broke into like 60 different houses. He was on a spree because he was on drugs. And that's the ultimate issue with a lot of this stuff that is going on, I think, is drugs. Either, you know, breaking the law to get money for drugs, or just possession of the drug itself, you know, is a crime typically. But a lot of guys want to cry and whimper and moan about, you know, I got told on, or I did this, or my lawyer screwed me, or whatever. You told on yourself. You live in a crappy part of town, and you're driving a brand new Lexus or a BMW, and you have no way of showing where that income came from. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out, where your money's coming from and what you're doing. And people aren't stupid, especially the IRS. The cops, they're not dumb. So, and they watch people, and you get told on. You know, I had a guy that I knew he's still in prison. He's still there, and I think about him sometimes. He's a good guy. He genuinely is a good guy. He's a meth-making fool. He's the Heisenberg of Kentucky, I promise. But he had a girl that left his farm. He had a farm in Western Kentucky. I don't want to say too much specifics because, you know, but he had a farm in Western Kentucky. This girl left his farm. He was making meth there. He had previous charges and convictions for making meth. And she left his house, got stopped by the police. Excuse me. His name just came out of her mouth before she was ever asked anything about it. She just said, blah, 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 blah. He's making meth. Go back and get him. If you let me go, I'll tell you whatever you want to know about blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the police worked with her. They put a camera on her. They did some controlled buys, had it on video, had the audio, you know, recording of that. They had her go into where he had the lab set up at. They had that on video. I mean, he was dead to rights. He was done as soon as the process started, really. And the state, as they're required to do, they showed him the evidence that was against him, they were going to use against him in his discovery. And he has a lot of people that are kind of poking him on the back of the head. Hey, man, you can win that. You can beat that. You can do this and this and this. And they're all lawyers, right? Everyone's in prison's a lawyer. And they'll be right there with you, doing your time with you when you take the thing to trial and lose. They won't. So the state showed him their hand. They said, look, if you do this, we will drop this and this and this, which were enhancements and persistent felony offenders, like a habitual criminal type charge, where it's like 30 years flat. It just enhanced the amount of time he was going to have to spend. They dropped all those things. Said, look, if you just plead guilty, we'll give you this and be done with it. 10 years. And he was getting poked by all those people on his, you know, over his shoulder. And he had these thoughts and these delusions of grandeur that he was going to get out. He went to trial and he got 55 years. He's still sitting there with that 55-year sentence. So, you know, I mean, it gets tiresome hearing and seeing the same stories play out. And, you know, people are quick to talk about, well, fuck the police, or they can't do anything to me, or I'm untouchable, or whatever. And they imagine that they're like these Al Capones, and Al Capone wasn't even Al Capone. But they think that things are a certain way, and they're not. And then when they get into custody and they get locked up, maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's something that's just is good with them, and that's what they enjoy. Maybe they like being in custody. I didn't. Not a single day that I was in jail or prison did I like it. So, you know, the attitude, but that's, I guess, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I guess that's the thing, is that there's not an acceptance of responsibility. And if there was an acceptance of responsibility, maybe they wouldn't be a criminal in the first place. Maybe they wouldn't keep going through this cycle of get locked up, get charged, get arrested, get convicted, go to trial, go to prison, get out on parole, screw up parole because they can't get right or can't do right or whatever, and then get sent back. It just, and there's times that people get There's a guy that I know. He's going through it right now. Chick lied on him, flat out lied on him. Said that he did some things to her, and she even said later on that no, he didn't. So he's still having to deal with that and think about the possibility of going back to prison for something that he didn't do. And that's not right either, but it happens. I was a legal aid, and I had a guy. About the worst thing you can do in prison is to assault an officer, and it's for a lot of reasons. It's the same kind of thing as, shooting a police officer out here in society. If you assault an officer, it's almost on that same level. It's not, but in there, as far as the severity of things that they consider, that's assaulting or killing an officer, obviously. Corrections officers are given the same protections that police officers are out in society and in prison, but it undermines the authority of the prison. It undermines the warden. It undermines the whole system, basically. And so there's severe penalties for that. This guy was smoking spice. They had a bunch of spice that was pretty potent, apparently, and had several guys that got caught with it and did a bunch of dumb stuff, basically. They just got spooked out and scared when they got caught, and so they reacted a certain way. Well, this guy saw a guard come around the corner, had a spice stick in his hand, freaked out, and started assaulting the guard. The guard called for backup. Backup came. He got into a fight with 2 or 3 of those guards and got 2 or 3 more charges of assaulting an officer. So when it came time for the administrative hearing that he had, that I was the legal aid for, I mean, there was no helping this guy. There's nothing, it wasn't a did you do right or do wrong. It was, my job for $1 a day was to defend this guy and hopefully try to lessen whatever severity, whatever it was, of the charges that he had. But there wasn't really much I could do. And I knew at a certain point that he was not going to get, outside criminal charges, which is a possibility when you assault an officer. It's something that the Department of Corrections can ask the Kentucky State Police to come in and do an investigation for an assault of an officer, which is a felony. So at least that wasn't going to happen, but there was other penalties that this guy was facing that were severe. I mean, he had each count of assaulting an officer was 2 years of good time loss. It was a year in solitary confinement, which isn't a fun place. It's a certain transfer. You're not going to do any of those kinds of things there at the minimum security prison that we were at. You're going to have overrides for a long time and aren't going to let you even come back to minimum security. You're going to get deferments, all kinds of consequences that come from what you did. And it's not good. And so I was trying to do what I could, and then it was kind of a foregone conclusion. We were outside waiting for the sergeant to do what he was going to do as far as just writing out the wording of the judge of the decision that he had made, basically. And I was asking the guy, I said, what happened? He said, oh man, the guard caught me. Okay, I mean, what, I'd read the reports, I'd seen everything. It was like a 2 or 3 hour long ordeal because they had to go through each individual charge and have a hearing and have a thing, each individual charge. So it's a pretty long thing for all of us involved there. But I tried to get out of him, what happened, what did you do, and why did you, it was just me and him talking. It wasn't like any of the guards were around. It wasn't like anyone was walking through there. It was, it was a pretty quiet day. And when anyone would come through, I'd just be quiet and we'd continue on after they left. But, I asked him, I said, what are you in prison for? He said, for murder and robbery. I said, so what happened with that? And he said, me and some friends basically robbed a drug dealer and killed him. Took some dope from him after we killed him. So that's pretty severe. I said, did you have a drug problem before? He's like, yeah. He's like, so what happened? What caused you to do this? And he's like, I do what? I don't know. And he was still, to me, he was still kind of high. This is pretty potent spice, apparently. But, it was unnerving to see that he didn't make a connection between the drugs that he was doing in prison, and then he was sent to prison in the first place for doing drugs and for violence. He helped to murder someone. I don't think he was an actual shooter or anything, but he was involved in the group that plotted out a murder and a robbery. And, I said, so what happened? He said, well, the guard caught me. I said, well, the guard caught you doing what? smoking a spiggity. Spiggity is a slang term for spice. I said, okay, but what were you doing when he caught you? He said, and it took a while. We went round and round and round. And then finally I said, maybe you shouldn't do drugs. Maybe drugs aren't your thing. And maybe committing crimes isn't your thing. Maybe you should just stop because you're not very good at it. This is my first time. I'm not going to come back to this place or a place like this at all, hopefully, ever again for anything. But, from what you've told me in your history and stuff, and I've seen the guy around, for a while before that. He seemed okay to me. But, maybe drugs aren't your thing. Maybe you should need to stop doing drugs and just go work at a 7-Eleven or something. Get out of this because you keep getting caught and doesn't turn out well for you. So his jaw dropped and you could probably drive a train through it, how big his mouth was. I guess he'd never been told that or never heard that. I don't know. But, people that go to prison, I'm not going to say all of them. I'm not, because I know, and I did it. I'm the first person to admit that. I disregarded consequences. I minimized, certain things in my life that I did, and that helped to create the conditions that ultimately led me to going to prison. Rationalize things, justify things. And there was a situation that happened here recently. An individual took something that wasn't his and stole it and then broke it. And he's 15 years old. He got kind of caught because there was 2 different camera angles from 3 different cameras. I mean, 15-year-old kid, he stole something and he broke whatever it was that he stole. And he got caught. And he isn't going to school. He goes to a very nice prep school here in Louisville. And the tuition for that school is very expensive. So I know that his family has money. That doesn't always mean that someone is going to be a productive, good member of society because they come from money. It doesn't mean that they're going to be a criminal if they come from a crappy or poor type of background. So, but the bottom line is that, I'm not a religious person. I'm an atheist. So I don't hold any kind of religious teachings. I think that all of that is false, and it's not. I'm not like a militant, violent, mean, satanic worship. Just because you're an atheist doesn't mean that you worship the devil or something. I don't. I don't need religion, if that makes any sense. I don't need religion in order to live my life. I don't feel that any of that's required, and I still try to be a good person based on me and what I know to be right and what I know to be wrong. So it's you have all different types of people in the world, and just because someone is a certain way doesn't mean that it's going to be a predictor that they're going to be something later on, but it can help to kind of forecast some things, if that makes any sense. So we have laws and rules in society, and if you don't obey them, then there's places for you to go, unfortunately, and some of those places aren't friendly. So don't go to jail. It's not fun. Don't go to prison. That's all I've got for now. I guess I'll come back next time. If you have any comments or questions, just leave them in the description or leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll try to get back to you personally if I can. Shouldn't be too hard of a deal because I've got 2 subscribers now. I'm gonna keep trying to grow this channel and keep trying to be honest and talk to people, and hopefully someone will hear what I'm saying and learn some things from it. So thanks. Bye.